Hey, today we're talking about a topic that comes up quite often with my students, and that is mistakes. We're talking about making mistakes with your English. Now, there are a lot of mixed feelings and mixed opinions about mistakes. Some people feel that mistakes are not acceptable, not okay, and others think that making mistakes is not really a big deal. It's part of the learning process. So chances are, as an English learner, you've probably heard both of these arguments. You've probably heard some people say that you need to be accurate, you should not be making mistakes, while other people say that mistakes are not really a big deal. So today we're going to take a closer look at this and we're going to have a chat about whether making mistakes in English really is a big deal or not. So let's get started. So first of all, it's important for you to understand that not all mistakes are equal. There are actually different kinds of mistakes when it comes to learning a language. So two common types of mistakes are slips and fossilized mistakes. Now, slips are basically less important or less serious mistakes that we make when we're speaking, and we can usually correct ourselves. So we can usually catch our mistake and correct it. And slips happen when you are nervous, when you are stressed, when you're uncomfortable. So these mistakes are not that big of a deal, and they happen not because you don't know the correct form of whatever you're saying. It's just more because you're nervous, okay? Now, fossilized mistakes are mistakes that become almost a permanent part of your speech. So it doesn't matter how many times someone has corrected you or how many times you've learned that you're making this mistake, you still make it. It's basically kind of a permanent part of your speech. So for example, a fossilized mistake is something like, he said me. He said me instead of he told me that. So if you always say he said me, even though maybe a teacher has corrected you many times and you know that this is wrong, you just can't help it. You always make this mistake. That's an example of a fossilized mistake. So fossilized mistakes happen for different reasons. Maybe no one ever corrected you. Maybe you were taught the wrong way in the first place. Or maybe you have difficulty understanding the difference between something in your language and something in English. That's a very common reason. But the good news is that even fossilized mistakes can be fixed. Once you are able to identify that you're making fossilized mistakes, you can take some steps to correct them. Now, before you can fix your fossilized mistakes, you need to identify them and realize that you're making them in the first place. And you might need a little bit of help here. So you can ask a teacher to help you. You can get yourself a private teacher to help you identify your mistakes. You can use some grammar checking tools to identify your grammar mistakes or your spelling mistakes, for example. You can give your colleagues and friends permission to point out your mistakes when you are speaking or writing in English. Now, it's important to remember that generally people will not correct you unless you are paying them to do that, or unless you ask them or give them permission explicitly to correct you. So I have heard a lot of my students say, nobody corrects me, but you have to remember that it's no one's job to correct you unless you specifically hire them to do that or ask them to do that. So if you are okay with that, if you're comfortable with your colleagues or your friends pointing out your mistakes, it is up to you to let them know. And that way, at least you have a starting point once you've identified, okay, I'm making mistakes with this word or with this grammar point or with this tense all the time. All right, so now let's talk about whether making mistakes is really a big deal or not. So does it matter if you're making mistakes in English, or does it not matter? When we were kids in school, when I was a kid in school, there was always a right and wrong answer. So if you make a mistake on a test, on an assignment, It's wrong, right? So there's right and wrong. However, now I am a teacher and I always find myself telling my students that it's okay to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't let the fear of making mistakes stop you. I always say this and I do stand by it. However, does that mean that mistakes never matter? Unfortunately, no. It does not mean that mistakes never matter. So, I don't want you to be afraid of making mistakes. However, the reality is that sometimes mistakes do matter. And here's how you can tell. If you're not sure, you need to think about it like this. Ask yourself, if I make a mistake here, will there be a serious or negative consequence for me? Okay, so if I make a mistake in this situation, will there be a serious or negative consequence for me? If you say yes, there will be a serious consequence, then of course it's important to correct your mistakes. If there's no serious consequence, the mistake is not really important. It's not a big deal in that case. So for example, if you're applying for a job and you're writing a CV or a cover letter in English, which is full of mistakes, unfortunately, this can cost you the job and you might not be hired. So in this case, mistakes matter and it is necessary to identify and correct your mistakes, all right? Let's say you are writing an essay or an academic paper for university where you are actually being graded or assessed on your English for some reason. In this case, your mistakes matter and there will be a consequence if you have too many mistakes, of course, all right? If you are taking an IELTS exam or an English assessment for immigration or for work, and again, your English is being assessed and you need this test to reach a goal or to move forward or to do something, then of course your mistakes matter more. However, let's say you are having a social conversation, you're chatting with someone new that you've met, and you're just trying to become friends with that person, right? And you make a few mistakes with your grammar, with your English. It's not the end of the world as long as the person understands you, right? So 1 or 2 mistakes in English is not going to stop you from making a friend or stop you from expressing yourself or stop you from getting your message across. So this is kind of how you can think about it. You need to look at every situation separately and ask yourself, if I make mistakes here, will there be a negative consequence for me? And if not, then don't stress too much about your mistakes. Now, at the same time, I do understand that there are a lot of English learners who lose confidence and feel embarrassed when they make mistakes in conversations and at work, and that is totally understandable. So if you are someone who gets embarrassed or feels embarrassed by mistakes, you are absolutely not alone. And in that case, it might be more important for you to work on correcting your mistakes and speaking English more accurately, all right? Now, the bottom line here is for you to really ask yourself, what is the most important thing for you right now with your English? So is fluency the most important thing? So speaking continuously and speaking naturally. Is accuracy the most important thing? So is it important for you to not make mistakes? Is grammar the most important thing? Is pronunciation the most important thing for you right now? I want to remind you that learning English or learning any language or any new skill is a journey. It is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. So you will not be perfect throughout this process, but you will improve if you are consistent. So just keep that in mind. Now, the purpose of today's chat was to help you think critically about this topic of making mistakes, to help you look at it from a different perspective and decide for yourself whether mistakes are a big deal for you or not, okay? And the answer is going to be different for everyone. I'm really curious to hear how you feel about making mistakes in English. Does it affect your confidence? Do you think it's a big deal? Do you think it's okay or not a big deal? Please let me know what your opinion is on this topic down below in the comments. I would love to hear from you. And if you are trying to improve your English conversation and communication skills, make sure you grab my free ebook, English Conversations Made Simple. Just click the link down below this lesson. Thank you so much for watching and for learning with me today. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with other English learners. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon in the next one.